On a personal note, this is a picture of me taken around the time that my grandmother was diagnosed with end-stage heart disease and sent home to die. She already had so many bypass surgeries, basically run out of plumbing, confined in a wheelchair, crushing chest pain. Her life was over at age 65. But then she heard about this guy, Nathan Pritikin, one of our early lifestyle medicine pioneers. And what happened next is actually detailed in Pritikin's biography. My grandma was one of the death's door people. Frances Greger, my grandmother, arrived in a wheelchair. Mrs. Greger had heart disease, angina, claudication. Her condition so bad, she could no longer walk without great pain in her chest and legs. Within 3 weeks, though, she was not only out of her wheelchair, she was walking 10 miles a day. Here's a picture of my grandma at her grandson's wedding, 15 years after doctors had abandoned her to die. She was given a medical death sentence at age 65, but thanks to a healthy diet, was able to enjoy another 31 years on this planet till age 96. To enjoy her 6 grandkids, including me. That's why I went into medicine. So years later, when Dr. Dean Ornish published his landmark lifestyle heart trial, proven with something called quantitative angiography, that indeed heart disease could be reversed. Arteries opened up without drugs, without surgery, just a plant-based diet and lifestyle program. I assumed this was going to be the game changer. I mean, my family had seen it with their own eyes, but here it was, in black and white, published in some of the most prestigious medical journals in the world, yet nothing happened. So wait a second. If effectively the cure to our #1 killer could get lost down some rabbit hole and ignored, what else might there be in the medical literature that could help my patients, but just didn't have a corporate budget driving its promotion? Well, I made it my life's mission to find out. For those who aren't familiar with my work, every year I read through every issue of every English language nutrition journal in the world. So busy folks like you don't have to. I then compile the most interesting, most groundbreaking, most practical findings to new videos and articles I upload every day to my nonprofit site, nutritionfacts.org. Everything on the website is free. There are no ads, no corporate sponsorship, strictly non-commercial, not selling anything. Just put it up as a public service, as a labor of love, as a tribute to my grandmother. New videos and articles every day on the latest in evidence-based nutrition. What a concept. So where did Pritikin get his evidence from? Well, a network of missionary hospitals set up throughout sub-Saharan Africa uncovered what may be one of the most important medical advances. According to one of our most preeminent medical figures of the last century, Dr. Dennis Burkett, the fact that many of our major and commonest diseases were universally rare, like heart disease. In the African population of Uganda, for example, coronary artery disease was almost non-existent. So wait a second, our #1 killer, almost non-existent, what were they eating? Well, they're eating lots of vegetables and grains and greens, and their protein almost entirely from plant sources. And they had the cholesterol levels to prove it, very similar to what one sees in kind of modern day plant eater. You say, wait a second, maybe they were just all dying early, never lived long enough to get heart disease. No, here's age-matched heart attack rates in Uganda versus St. Louis. Out of 632 autopsies in Uganda, only 1 myocardial infarction. Out of 632 age and gender matched autopsies in Missouri, 136 myocardial infarctions, more than 100 times the rate of our leading killer. In fact, they were so blown away, went back, did another 800 autopsies in Uganda, still just had 1 small healed infarct. I mean, it wasn't even the cause of death. Out of 1,427 patients, less than 1 in 1,000, whereas here, our disease is an epidemic. Atherosclerosis. Hardening the arteries is a disease that begins in childhood. By age 10, nearly all kids raised on the standard American diet already have what are called fatty streaks building up inside of their arteries, the first stage of the disease. These streaks then turn into plaques in our 20s, get worse in our 30s, and then can start killing us off. In our heart is called heart attack, and in our brain, the same disease can cause a stroke. So if there's anyone here today older than age 10, then the question isn't whether or not to eat healthy to prevent heart disease. It's whether you want to reverse the heart disease you likely already have, whether you know it or not. But is that even possible? When researchers took people with heart disease, put them on the kind of plant-based diet followed by populations that did not get epidemic heart disease, their hope is, hey, maybe we could slow the disease down a little bit, maybe even stop it. But instead, something miraculous happened. As soon as people stopped eating artery clogging diets, their bodies were able to start dissolving some of that plaque away, opening up arteries without drugs, without surgery, suggesting their bodies wanted to be healthy all along, but were just never given the chance. That remarkable improvement in blood flow to the heart muscle itself was after just 3 weeks of plant-based nutrition. The human body is a self-healing machine, unless you're sticking with a fork 3 times a day. Now, sure, you can choose moderation and hit yourself with a smaller hammer, but why beat yourself up at all? This is nothing new. American Heart Journal, 1977, cases like Mr. FW here, heart disease so bad, couldn't even make it to the mailbox. Started eating healthier. A few months later, he was climbing mountains, no pain. Right? Now, there are these fancy new classes of anti-angina drugs on the market now, cost thousands of dollars a year, but at the highest dose may be able to extend exercise duration as long as 33.5 seconds. It does not look like those choosing the drug route are going to be climbing mountains anytime soon. See, plant-based diets aren't just safer and cheaper, they can work better because you're treating the underlying cause of the disease. Now, normally I'd go into cancer, talk about the other 15 leading causes of death, talk about the role diet may play in preventing, arresting, or reversing each of our top 15 killers, but what more do you need to know? There's only one diet ever been proven to reverse heart disease in the majority of patients, a plant-based diet. So anytime someone tries to sell you on some new diet, do me a favor, ask them one simple question. What are you saying? Has this diet been proven to reverse heart disease? Number one reason me and all my loved ones have died. I mean, the answer is no. How would you even consider? If that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse the number one killer of men and women, shouldn't that kind of be the default diet until proven otherwise? And the fact that can also be useful in preventing, arresting, reversing other leading killers like type 2 diabetes and hypertension would seem to make the case for plant-based eating simply overwhelming. Most deaths in the United States are preventable and related to nutrition. According to the Global Burden of Disease Study, the largest study of human disease risk factors in history, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the number one cause of death in these United States is our diet. The number one cause of disability in the United States, it's our diet. Now bumping tobacco smoking to number 2, cigarettes now only kill about 500,000 Americans every year, whereas our diet kills hundreds of thousands more. So if most deaths are preventable related to nutrition, then obviously nutrition is the number one thing taught in medical school. I mean, obviously it's the number one thing your doctor talks to you about at every single visit, right? Well, how could there be this disconnect between the science and the practice of medicine? Let's do a thought experiment. Imagine yourself a smoker back in the 1950s. Back in the 1950s, the average per capita cigarette consumption was 4,000 cigarettes a year, meaning the average person walking around smoked half pack a day on average. The media was telling people to smoke. Famous athletes agreed. Even Santa Claus wanted you to smoke. I mean, look, you want to keep fit and stay slim, so make sure to smoke and eat lots of hot dogs to stay trim and lots of sugar to stay slim and trim. A lot better than that apple there. I mean, sheesh, right? Though apples do connote goodness and freshness, reads one internal tobacco industry memo, which brings up many possibilities for a youth-oriented cigarette. They want to make apple-flavored cigarettes for kids. Shameless. For digestion's sake, you smoke. No curative powers claimed by Philip Morris, but hey, better be safe than sorry and smoke. Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere.
Don't buy another pair of glasses until you've seen what this new invention can do. These self-adjustable
Sorry about that.
No woman ever says no, they're so round, so firm, so fully packed. After all, John Wayne smoked them until he got lung cancer and died. You know, back then, even the paleo folks were smoking. And so were the doctors. Now, this is not to say there wasn't controversy within the medical profession. Sure, you know, some doctors smoke Camels, but others preferred Lucky. So there was a little disagreement there. The leader of the U.S. Senate agreed. Who would want to give their throat a vacation? Not a single case of throat irritation. How could there be when cigarettes are just as pure as the water you drink? Maybe up in Flint, Michigan. But don't worry, if you do get irritated, your doctor can just write you a prescription for cigarettes. This is in the Journal of the American Medical Association. So when the AMA is saying smoking on balance is good for you, and the American Medical Association is saying that, where could you turn back then if you just wanted the facts? What's the new data advanced by science? Well, she was too tired for fun, and then she smoked a Camel. Babe Ruth spoke of proof positive medical science, that is, when he still could speak, before he died of throat cancer. You know, by some miracle back then, there was a smokingfacts.org website that could deliver the science directly, bypassing commercially corruptible institutional filters. You would have become aware of studies like this. This is an Adventist study out of California, published in 1958, showing that non-smokers had at least 90% less lung cancer than smokers. Right? But this wasn't the first. When famed surgeon Michael DeBaker was asked why his studies back in the 30s linking lung cancer to smoking were simply ignored, he had to remind people what it was like back then. We were a smoking society. It was everywhere. It was in the movies, airplanes, medical meetings were one heavy haze of smoke. Smoking was, in a word, normal. Okay. So back to our thought experiment. If you're a smoker in the 50s in the know, what do you do? I mean, with access to the science, you realize the best available balance of evidence suggests your smoking habit, not so good for you. So do you change? Or do you wait? If you wait until your doctor tells you between puffs to quit, you'd have cancer by then. If you wait until the powers that be officially recognize it, like the Surgeon General did in the subsequent decade, you'd be dead by then. It took more than 7,000 studies and the deaths of countless smokers before the first Surgeon General's report against smoking came out. You'd think maybe after the first 6,000 studies could give people a little heads up or something. Powerful industry. Maybe we should have stopped smoking after the 700th study like this. As a smoker in the 50s, on one hand, you had all of society, the government, the medical profession itself telling you to smoke. And on the other hand, all you had was the science. If you're even aware of studies like that. All right, well, let's fast forward 55 years. You know, there's a new Adventist study out of California warning Americans about something else that may be putting in their mouths. Of course, it's not just one study, put all the studies together. Mortality from all causes put together, many of our dreaded diseases significantly lower among those eating more plant-based diets. So instead of someone going along with America's smoking habits in the 50s, imagine you or someone you know going along with America's eating habits today. What do you do? I mean, with access to the science, you realize the best available balance of evidence suggests your eating habits are not so good for you. So do you change? Or do you wait? If you wait until your doctor tells you between bites to change, it'll be too late. In fact, even after the Surgeon General's report came out, the American Medical Association went on record refusing to endorse it. Why? Couldn't have been because they were just handed a $10 million check from the tobacco industry? Maybe. So we know why the tobacco industry was sucking up, why the AMA was sucking up to the tobacco industry. Why weren't more individual doctors speaking up? There were a few gallant souls ahead of their time, speaking up against industries killing millions, but why not more? Maybe it's because the majority of physicians themselves smoke cigarettes. Just like the majority of physicians today continue to eat foods that are contributing to our epidemics of dietary disease. What was the AMA's rallying cry back then? Everything in moderation. Extensive scientific studies have proven smoking in moderation. Oh, that's fine. Sound familiar? The food industry used the same tobacco industry tactics, twisting the science, misinformation. The same scientists for hire paid to downplay the risks of cigarettes and toxic chemicals are the same paid for by the National Confectioners Association to downplay the risks of candy, and the same paid for by the meat industry to downplay the risks of meat. Whereas animal foods and processed foods may be killing off at least 14 million people every year. So those of us involved in this kind of evidence-based nutrition revolution, we're talking 14 million lives in the balance. Maybe, you know, plant-based nutrition should be considered kind of the nutritional equivalent of quitting smoking. But how long do we have to wait before the CDC says, don't wait for open heart surgery to start eating healthier as well? Until the system changes, we need to take personal responsibility for our own health, for our family's health. We can't wait until society catches up to the science again, because it's a matter of life and death. You know, a few years ago, Dr. Kim Williams became president of the American College of Cardiology. He was asked in an interview why he himself follows the same diet he recommends to all his patients, a strictly plant-based diet. I don't mind dying, Dr. Williams replied. I just don't want it to be my own fault. Thank you.
We have Dr. Anita Edwards with us now, and we have Dr. Wynne Brown. Glad to have you both here participating in this. Right now, I have Dr. Michael Greger joining us. And let me just say a few words about Dr. Greger as he's coming in. So Dr. Michael Greger is a founding member and fellow of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Michael Greger is a physician and internationally recognized speaker on nutrition. His science-based nonprofit, nutritionfacts.org, offers a free online portal hosting more than 2,000 videos. Dr. Greger has presented at the Conference on World Affairs and the World Bank, testified before Congress, and was invited as an expert witness in Oprah Winfrey's defense in the infamous meat defamation trial. A graduate of Cornell University School of Agriculture and Tufts University School of Medicine, Dr. Greger is also an acclaimed author. He's written the book, How Not to Die, the How Not to Die cookbook, as well as the How Not to Die diet. And they all became instant New York Times best-selling books. More than 1 million copies of How Not to Die have been sold, and all proceeds Dr. Greger receives from the sales of his book and speaking honoraria are donated directly to charity. So happy to have Dr. Greger with us at this time. And so, Dr. Greger, can you hear us? May have to ask you to unmute. There you go.
There we go.
There
I
you go.
can
All
hear you
right.
loud and clear.
All right. Now I got to find you so that I can, oh, there you are. All right.
I'm the one bobbing around.
All right. And Dr. Anita, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right. I got to find you on here too.
I'm not bobbing around.
All right. There we go. All
Yeah.
right. And Dr. Brown, I know I saw you. Welcome, doctors. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Brown or to Dr. Edwards to begin the discussion with Dr. Greger.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and we thank Dr. Greger for coming on. I think I missed the very first part of the video, but I did catch the middle, and then I've gotten to read some of the books. So have some interesting topics and questions. And I think as Dr. Welsh has said, if you'd like to put questions in the chat, we will also feed those questions both to Dr. Greger and to Dr. Brown. So I think the concept of needing to change our diet is very interesting, but being African-American, and I see most of the participants are African-American, I know that sometimes our diet is not always favorable to health. One of the things you seem to be very big on, Dr. Greger, is green vegetables. You see, it makes them smile. I saw that you even talk about how green vegetables prevents breast cancer, or can be used. And just wonder if you maybe could give us some interesting tidbits on our vegetables.
Dark green leafy vegetables are the healthiest vegetables out there. In general, vegetables are the healthiest type of food, and dark green leafy vegetables are the healthiest of the healthiest. And then cruciferous dark green leafy vegetables like collard greens and kale, cabbage, and broccoli are the healthiest of the healthiest of the healthiest. And so I encourage people to actually eat cruciferous vegetables every single day. And there are indeed many traditional healthy foods like collard greens and split peas. Yes, unfortunately, the American diet has slid a great deal, and we're not centering our diets around the healthiest of healthy foods that grow out of the ground.
And maybe this question, well, to you and then to Dr. Brown, as African Americans, and I think your book talks about this a little bit, the way we cook our vegetables. Many people have talked about the way we overcook our vegetables. If you go to a restaurant, we get them almost barely steamed, blanched, and still crispy. And I know most of the times on Thanksgiving, that's not the way our greens probably look, or our broccoli at any time. So I just like your thoughts on that. And then also, Dr. Brown, just the soil that maybe our greens are grown in, and how does that affect us? Or you all can take questions however you like.
You want to take it first, Dr. Brown?
Sure. So I know that traditionally the greens that we eat are really amazing. Growing up, what I learned was that we not only cook the greens, but we have to drink the water that it's cooked in. The pot liquor is really important, because if we cook our greens enough, a lot of the vitamins might actually be in the water. So that's one thing that's important. Now, we know that steamed vegetables release the vitamins and minerals that are more available to us for digestion. Cooking more doesn't necessarily make it better, but if anybody's had uncooked greens, they know how hard it is to chew. So you get more fiber than you actually get all the benefit. So I think I'll stop there with that one and let you take the next part, but I'll come back to that.
Well, first I just want to say that there are certainly soul food components that are fantastic, right? Collard greens, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, dried beans and peas, like black-eyed peas, watermelon, blackberries, corn, okra, right? Unfortunately, soul food also can have a lot of added fats, sugars, salt, high-fat meats, deep frying, chitlins, pig intestines. And, you have to think, where did the pig intestines, tradition come from? And it's because enslaved Africans were forced in the Deep South to survive during slavery. That's in stark contrast to the traditional Western African diets that were predominantly plant-based, centered around a foundation of greens and fruits and legumes and nuts and vegetables and whole grains. Yet they've been westernized, bastardized into diets high in fried foods, sweetened drinks, red and processed meats. But the good news is that more and more African Americans are adopting plant-based diets to combat health problems like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. And the good news is we have tremendous power over our health, destiny, and longevity. The vast majority of premature death and disability is preventable with a healthy enough plant-based diet and lifestyle.
So it does make a difference what soil your food is grown in. Some soils are contaminated with heavy metals. Some soils have chemicals in them from pesticides and herbicides. So knowing, it really is important to know who's growing your food. Really important. The White House, Michelle Obama had all the dirt replaced when they found that their soil was high in arsenic. In North Carolina, arsenic is in a lot of the soil, so it's not uncommon when I'm working with people and testing them for them to have a little bit of arsenic in their blood because of that. They're eating foods with arsenic in it. If you have a plot of land and you're not sure whether it's good or not to grow food, then definitely you can have your soil tested. You can grow sunflowers there, and that will help remediate the soil and remove some of those chemicals from the soil as well. But I also have a question as we're talking about our community and what's healthful for us to eat. I know there have been some studies on DNA and eating healthy foods. Dr. Greger, can you comment maybe on some of that research about DNA and how that informs how we should be eating and where we are with that research process?
You mean in terms of like personalized nutrition?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of this concept of personalized nutrition is really just kind of a money-making scam. People don't like to hear generic advice. They want to hear specific health advice. So just telling people to eat your vegetables, people shrug. But if I say, oh, you have a gene that says you should eat your vegetables, people are more likely to do it. But we all have the eat more vegetables gene. We all have the eat more fruits gene. There are minor genetic differences that determine how fast you metabolize caffeine, for example, whether or not you can digest the milk sugar lactose into adulthood. There's a mutation in a small fraction of humanity that allows them to digest milk after infancy, which is strange because milk is for babies. But the majority of the world's population still, as with the rest of the mammalian kingdom, cannot digest the milk sugar lactose properly after infancy. And so there are certainly genetic differences, but in general, it really comes down to the consensus statement of True Health Initiative, which brought together hundreds of the top nutrition scientists around the world to agree on the healthiest diet for the human species. And you can go to truehealthinitiative.org to read it. And spoiler alert, it's a diet centered around whole, unprocessed plant foods.
So there is two other questions around vegetables. One is, should we eat the greens and broccoli raw, like in a salad? And then the other one was, buying food in a grocery store can be challenging. Is organic vegetables best? So maybe Dr. Greger, you can take the first one. Should we eat them raw? And then Dr. Brown, maybe you can take the organic vegetables.
So we should eat our greens in whichever way will get us to eat the most of them. If you like them raw, eat them raw. If you like them cooked, eat them cooked. Whichever gets you to stuff your face with more of them.
All right.
Okay. So for organics, there's no such thing as 100% organic. If you look at the organic standards, it's somewhere between 95 and 99% organic. And even that, they have some pest management that has been used that they say is not harmful to humans or animals or water. So the challenge is there are insects out there that are just as hungry as we are, and they're going to want to eat the vegetables just as much as we do, and the fruits. However, that said, your exposure to these chemicals can vary depending on how the vegetables or fruits have been treated. So if you can, organic could be a better choice. The Environmental Working Group nonprofit tests foods, and every year they come out with a dirty dozen. So we know that, for example, berries are highly sprayed, and you might be doing a good thing eating a lot of berries. But if they're highly sprayed, you also get exposed to herbicides and pesticides that may not be good for you. So personally, I choose organic whenever possible, and sometimes I choose not to buy things if it's not organic. But that's me. Some people don't have that option, but I also choose to have a garden. So I think there are a lot of ways to do that. But to get in your fruits and vegetables is really important. There are ways to wash things, but some things come through the soil and get into the plant. So the more aware we are of all the processes, and if we can find locally grown things at farmers markets, then get to know your farmer, and then you can make a more informed choice.
I'd like to just emphasize something that Dr. Brown said, is that eating more fruits and vegetables is really the kind of a primary importance. There's a modeling study that I profiled in How Not to Die that suggested that if half of Americans ate a single more serving of fruits or vegetables every day, we would every year prevent 20,000 cases of cancer. That's how powerful produce is. But because they were talking about conventional fruits and vegetables, pesticide-laden fruits and vegetables, the extra pesticide burden on the American public, if they were to do that, would cause 10 cases of cancer. So overall, we would just prevent 19,990 cases of cancer. That gives you a sense of the tremendous benefit of fruits and vegetables versus the tiny bump in risk. But I totally agree with Dr. Brown. Why accept any risk at all? Why not get all benefit, no risk by choosing organic? Great, but it shouldn't prevent us from stuffing our face with as many fruits and vegetables as possible. That's the most important thing.
So I'm going to ask one more vegetable question so we can get some of the others. And it's still asking about the way of cooking them. If is cooking them cooking out all the nutritions? I think that's what most of us hear, that when we're cooking them, we're cooking out nutrition.
Where is that nutrition going, though? It's leaching into the cooking water. So as long as you are using that pot liquor, or it's part of a dish that includes that cooking liquid, then it's kind of like green tea. What's green tea? It's dark green leaves dipped into hot water, and then so much nutrition leaches out, you throw away the leaves and you just drink the tea. Right? And so ideally we'd want both. We'd not want to throw away the leaves, we want to eat the leaves, but we also want to get that liquid as well. You can use it to saute, used as a base for soups and broths. So it's not that the nutrition is lost, but rather that some of it makes it into the cooking water. You can see it turn, you steam some greens and the water at the bottom turns this beautiful green. We don't want to lose that nutrition if we can.
I can't seem to get away from the green questions. So uh, what is the biggest myth about plant-based diet that needs to be corrected? This is the last green question because there is some other questions. So this is the last one. I just want to put them all together. So go ahead. The biggest myth about plant-based diets.
Well, the one that I hear most often is, kind of where do you get your protein from? And the response really is, look, anyone who doesn't know how to get protein on a plant-based diet doesn't know beans, legumes, beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils. These are the plant protein superstars of the plant kingdom. And so we should try to eat them every day.
All right. I just had it. Go ahead, Dr. Brown.
I was going to say, I think the other myth about plant-based diets is I can't afford to do it, especially if it's organic. And I think really we can't afford to not be healthy. I think that's kind of where it is. And we're all making choices about what we pay for. Always. I mean, I'm always going to get my hair cut, right? So I think there are things we have to consider when it's about our health and how we prioritize things.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, people think it's expensive to eat plant-based, but like, have you seen the price of dried beans? I mean, there's this common misconception, but there was a study done that found that the average family of four eating a vegetarian diet would save $750 a year, right? You think about it, like, what are some of the most expensive things? It's the meat aisle, not the produce aisle. And so it's healthier and cheaper. It's like, what would you do with an extra $750 in your pocket? Not to mention all the healthcare savings that come along with it.
I think, as we look, especially here in Pittsburgh, I think we have a lot of food deserts here. And I think that becomes an issue when what you see on our corners is Family Dollars as opposed to seeing a grocery store or a farmer market. So I think that's part of flourishing thought that we need to improve that. So there was one asked about sugar. Someone wanted to ask, let me get that question out again because I forgot what the question was. Where is questions chat? They wanted to know they've read a lot about the effects of sugar, refined sugar on their health, and they wanted to have some comments about the effect of refined sugar and sweeteners.
This is one of the most important things with, in terms of preventing diabetes and reversing diabetes. The added sugars in our diet are literally killing us. So when you look at, when people come and say, I can't lose weight or I'm having trouble, I'm gaining weight and I don't know why, the first thing I talk about is the added sugars. So added sugars being table sugar you put in, it doesn't matter if it's white sugar, raw sugar, organic sugar, your body's going to see it as sugar. They've done studies on sweeteners that are recommended in diet centers. All of the natural sweeteners and artificial sweeteners, eventually people will gain weight, not lose weight. So to really be healthy and to minimize inflammation in your body, you really have to eliminate the added sugars, natural sweeteners, and artificial sweeteners. It's 30 days of hell. You're going to withdraw. You're not going to feel great. You'll probably hate everybody, and everybody will be talking about sugary things for 30 days. But after 30 days, your receptors reset and you won't have the cravings at that point. So it's not that you would never have a piece of cake ever again in your life, but it's not, you could walk in a room and it wouldn't be calling your name. Sugars they cause inflammation. They make inflammation worse. So if you're having pain, your pain's going to be worse, not better, when you have these sugars in your diet. Artificial sweeteners are chemicals. We can't kid ourselves about that. There's nothing good about them, and they're not a food or food group. So we're kind of at the mercy of marketing with a lot of these things. So that's kind of where I go with sugar. Some people say, well, I'll just use honey. But if you don't get through that 30 days, even honey will have your receptors causing you to crave sugar, and you'll eat more, and again, you'll gain weight. So you can't be pre-diabetic or diabetic and have a lot of honey in your diet, because your body will see it as sugar. So that's one of those don't get me started ones.
But
Rots your teeth too.
What did you say, Dr. Greger? I'm
I
sorry.
said it rots your teeth too.
Mhm.
So there was a follow-up question to that. So how do you detox from sugar?
Dr. Brown nailed
I
it.
recommend a plan. You need a plan, but there are herbs that can help stop the cravings. One that's out there is bitter melon. It's been used for centuries. You can take bitter melon for a month while you've stopped everything. But it's like stopping smoking. You can't just have some and take bitter melon and think you're going to quit. It's like having a nicotine patch on and still smoking cigarettes. Just doesn't work.
I do want to ask, I know there's other questions coming in, but Dr. Greger, in your book, you talked about prostate cancer and milk. And you made a comment that my daughter constantly says. She says, we're the only people that drink some other animal's milk or pee. It doesn't not really pee, but so I'd like you to comment on, especially since there's several men on this, and we don't usually see men on these talks. So could you talk about prostate cancer and milk?
Sure. Not only the only species drinks the milk of another species, but the only species that drinks milk after infancy. No surprise, since cow milk is designed to add a few 100 pounds onto a calf in a matter of months. It's kind of it's a stew of growth hormones, and those growth hormones can, when we're adults, grow things we don't want growing, like prostate cancer. And so there's a very consistent association between dairy consumption and prostate cancer, particularly lethal prostate cancer. And we're not sure exactly what the mechanism is. It may be through something called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which is a growth promoting cancer-causing hormone in the body that's boosted when we consume animal protein like dairy protein. Maybe that's the mechanism, but the good news is that early stage prostate cancer can only be prevented and arrested, but even reversed with a plant-based diet, which is shown by Dr. Dean Ornish. And so those in the early stages where they're just kind of watching and waiting, I would encourage them to go on a dairy-free plant-based diet to slow the progression of the disease.
So I'm just going to add, is it okay to do like almond milk and oatmeal milk?
Oh, sure. Now there's so many options. There's just a constellation of options in the dairy case. And so all the plant milks are lactose free. So don't cause those same digestive issues, and don't cause problems with cancer growth. In fact, soy consumption, like soy milk, for example, associated with decreased risk of both prostate cancer and breast cancer, and improved survival in breast cancer patients, and decreased recurrence of breast cancer. So that's probably the healthiest would be soy milk, but any of the milks are better than dairy milk.
And then just one other question. So if we're eating cheese or other products from milk, are we getting the same effect, or?
Yeah, unfortunately you are. And then you have the additional harm of the sodium. Cheese is a high sodium food, and hypertension is one of our leading risk factors for death and disability in this country. And so we need to really decrease our sodium intake, ideally down like 1,500 milligrams a day is the American Heart Association recommendation, which is really hard if you're eating lots of processed foods.
Okay. I think we want to go back to the sugars. People are concerned about sugars. So they wanted to know more coping skills on how to get rid of these sugars out of their diet.
I think Dr. Brown really said it. It's all about preventing, our taste buds have been blunted by the processed food industry with this hyper salty, hyper fatty, hyper sweet foods, such that normal natural foods don't taste good. You put people on a low salt diet, everything tastes like cardboard for a couple of weeks. But eventually something amazing happens. You give people soup salted to taste, put them on a low salt diet. A few weeks later, give them the same bowl of soup and they actually prefer less salt. The original soup was too salty, the one that they liked before. And so your body naturally adjusts. Same thing happens with sugar. And so, you can think like the ripest peach in the world would taste sour after a bowl of Fruit Loops. I mean, we've just been, the food industry has created these hyper palatable foods that really kind of short circuit us. And so what's nice is that eventually it's not a decision between, do I eat healthy or do I enjoy my food? Eventually, after a few weeks, your taste buds change, your palate changes, your taste buds turn over every 3 weeks or so, such that all of a sudden natural, healthy, whole foods taste good. Like, you're eating corn on the cob, no butter, no salt, and it's delicious. It's that, and so then you get the best of both worlds. Wait a second, tastes great, and you get to live longer. That's what healthy eating is all about.
We have one question is a little different, and it talks about prescription medicine. What is the best evidence available about produce prescriptions? I'm not sure. Maybe it's not prescription medicine. I'm not sure what it means.
There are produce prescriptions. These are doctors, right? Instead of saying, I want you to take this particular pill, say, I want you to eat, a cup of dark green leafy vegetables one time every day. And then sometimes that's associated with some kind of farmer's market program where they actually have discounted or free produce that you can take that prescription to. And so, it's an innovative way for doctors to emphasize that medicine is food, that food can be medicine, that exercise can be medicine, powerful pharmacological effects, the things you'd see with like high blood pressure drugs, with anti-diabetes drugs, with, cholesterol lowering drugs. Many of those same effects can be achieved through natural means, through diet and lifestyle change.
All right. I did have more of a question. So you all, are telling us how our diet will change back if we take salt and we take the sugar out. But why is it that if these things weren't what is good for us, why is it that our body does like the taste of our meats and our fats and all those things?
We evolved in the context of scarcity. And so our body craves calorically dense foods because our greatest risk was starving to death. There was also no salt shakers or KFC on the African savannah. And so we had this craving for salt just to maintain our maintain our life. But the processed food industry is taking advantage of those natural biological urges, turned them against us. So our natural cravings for sweet is what? Craving for ripe fruit. But the food industry has taken that craving for ripe fruit and turned it into craving for Fruit Loops and all sorts of pastries, etc. And so these are natural, normal urges in a natural food environment, but in an unnatural food environment, they can be killing us.
So our cells have great intelligence, and the cells will adapt to whatever we do and continue to do. So if you eat Popeyes for a month, your cells will adapt to Popeyes and try to get some nutrients out of that. If you're not eating foods that are alive, so for example, meats are dead, right? We don't even know how long they've been dead. So you're going to try to get some nutrition out of that. And sometimes it goes well, but a lot of times it doesn't. So if you eat a green bean off the plant that you just picked, you'll get a lot more vitamins and minerals from that than you would if it's shipped across country. So we're designed to eat things as hunter-gatherers in the moment. The further we get away from our food source, the harder it is for us to get the nutrition that we need from it. And so we overeat, all kinds of things. Our cells try to keep us going, and they'll do anything to adapt. And so we develop all these chronic diseases in a way to just keep going.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to hand it off to Dr. Brown to take the rest of the questions. I have to run, but thank you so much, everyone. It was an honor to be part of your community.
Thank you, Dr. Greger. We appreciate you being with us. And thank you for all the information that you've given us. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a spoiler alert here that there is a produce prescription. I want to read it correctly. We have a few produce prescription programs in Pittsburgh, and that's a shame. As a physician, I didn't know about them, so I have to take it back to my company, because we are always trying to produce. Encourage these kind of things. Dr. Brown, I know you asked Dr. Greger about the genetics, but what is your thoughts on genetics?
Yes. So a couple of things. Actually, there is research that's going on DNA and diet. Some of that will get to be a marketing ploy, and they will be selling kits so that people can test their DNA. But I think the most important thing is this. One, remember that your cells will adapt to whatever comes. So, you know, if you're eating a crappy diet, your body will adapt to that, but it doesn't mean that you'll be healthy. You might have chronic diseases as a result. So we can't like blame our grandparents on arthritis that we have today, for example. A lot of those things develop because of choices we've made in our own lives, whether it's about what we're eating, how we're eating, level of activity, all that. But in terms of DNA, what I think about with that, so there's the research looking at diet, but what I see is, for example, people move to the US from some other country, and they were eating a completely different diet there. They move here and they start eating the good old American diet, and they develop the same chronic conditions that we see plaguing us today. If we look at what our DNA informs us about how we work best, so we come back to the greens, we come back to the black-eyed peas, we come back to beans and rice, we come back to the foods that our ancestors ate. And if we go back to that kind of diet, we really are looking at a plant-based diet. So we can't expect that we can then ignore that and eat whatever we want when we go out to eat. We eat breaded foods. That's not a part of what we grew up with, right? In the days of our grandparents, their grandparents, that's not the kind of diet we had. Those things informed our DNA today. Now, we can change our DNA if we eat the wrong things for long enough, and we'll see it in our children, because then their DNA will be informed with what we did. So
I have one more
yeah.
question, and I'm adding to this person's question. So they asked about frozen vegetables, and I'm gonna ask about canned vegetables. You know, and what is the nutritional value of frozen, you know, and processed vegetables versus getting fresh?
Yes. So if you can't get fresh, frozen is the next best option. And again, the sooner it's frozen from the time it's picked, that's when you get the best nutritional value. So you start to lose that nutrition over time, the longer you're away from either eating it or freezing it. So that's important. When we say processed, that means we're either adding something to it or changing it. So if you have greens and they add salt, then it becomes processed, even if it's frozen. But if they just freeze the greens, not a problem. So that's the difference. Now, canned foods, you know, we were around, that's in our lifetime that canned foods came around. So not canning, but the canned foods that we buy. And we've had nothing but problems since canned foods came around. So it was very convenient to have canned foods. You know, as women were going more and more and more into the workforce, it was just more convenient. But we've had bisphosphonates, we've had BPAs in the can, lining the cans to keep them from rusting. So most of the cans are not BPA free. So we're actually getting chemicals added in with our foods In addition to, like with canned beans, they definitely add salt. There may be lower salt options, but they still add salt to beans. We're better off to cook our own, and they cost less. So canned foods are going to cost more. The nutrition won't be as good. You don't know how long it's even been in the can. So to cook our own dried beans, that would be the best option.
So I want to the comment about the produce pharmacy. So Saul is on this call, and Saul, if you could respond in the chat, because I know you and I have spoken about this at one point in time. So I'd like for her to just share with others here the food pharmacy program and where folks can get the these scripts. So can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear. Thank you. I just posted a comment in the comment section just saying that yes, we partner with a number of clinics around the county to have healthcare providers prescribe fruits and vegetables to patients that are experiencing food insecurity or a diet-related illness, and often both together. There are some eligibility criteria that these patients have to meet, but if they meet that, then they are, given this prescription, but the prescriptions themselves are vouchers that they can then take to farmers markets and stores around the county and get their fruits and vegetables. And they are eligible to get this on a monthly basis. For programs differ, but anywhere between 6 months and an indefinite amount of time. Thank you for allowing me to explain this.
Sure. Thanks, Sol. And so Sol is with if you haven't seen it in the chat, she's with the Food Trust. Thanks, Sol.
Dr. Reverend Welsh, I'd just like to just make a little comment, well, a little anecdotal kind of thing. I was at my girlfriend's over the 4th of July, and she roasted corn in the microwave, and I was saying, oh, well, this is really healthy. She didn't boil it, she didn't get rid of the nutritions, and then she had a thing that she could take all the kernels off, and I'm saying, okay, we're going to have this really healthy corn. She then sat and mixed it with sugar and honey, and and I said, oh, well, there goes the health. So I think sometimes even when we cook, we may be trying to cook and eat healthy, but we still have to, as Dr. Brown was saying, we have to watch what we're cooking with. I think most of us have gotten away from adding pork and stuff to our greens, but still we add meat or oils, and many times that still takes away from the nutrition. So we still have to change our habits some. So thank you very much.
So the other thing about that, corn and soy are the most genetically modified foods in the US right now. And, in Europe, they ban genetically modified foods. So the problem is those are Roundup ready. So they're using Roundup on the fields and then providing them with the seed that doesn't react to the Roundup. So that's the thing that grows. So if you're not eating organic corn or not eating organic soy, then you're getting residue of Roundup.
Thank you for this education. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. The GMO foods, the Europe has the precautionary principle in place, which prevents them from eating certain meats, importing meats from the US, and other things that have been genetically modified. And so I'm glad you brought that up, Dr. Brown. So then, given the fact that, many of the foods that we may find in our supermarkets are coming from large processing houses or growers, I guess. So you have Monsanto and other places that already, one, they own the herbicide, the pesticide industry, and plus, they also are controlling the production of food. And so some of the foods we're getting are coming from these large international companies may not be good for us. And so I guess buying organic and buying maybe local organic may be the best thing, you would say?
Definitely local is better, definitely local organic. I would definitely look at the environmental working group when it comes to trying to source your best source of foods. We have so many chemicals in our environment right now that we're exposed to. It's just ridiculous, really. But I would say knowing your farmer is really helpful. So developing a relationship, if there is a farmer's market, that can be really helpful because then you get to know how your food is grown. If you can get a container garden going, that can definitely help. I know sometimes there's challenges even to get to a farmer's market in terms of transportation. But when people come together as a group, churches have put gardens together. There are a lot of places where you can actually address this and not go without. I think it's when you look at it, we've put so much of our trust in agencies. We put trust in the FDA, the USDA, and honestly, we have to be responsible for what we eat and what we drink. Flint, Michigan was an alarm, really. The quality of water is a real issue. The environmental working group, I put their website on the chat, but you can go there. They have a tap water database for every county. And consistently, 3 to 11, sometimes more, cancer-causing agents in the municipal water. So just boiling water will not solve it. You have to drink filtered water. You have to cook with filtered water, shower with filtered water, because we're getting exposed to things that can cause cancer on a daily basis. So I think we need to take that responsibility. Food definitely is high on the list, but water is right up there with it.
One of the things we know that Pittsburgh is not only high in arsenic because of the mill industry, but Pittsburgh soil is also high in lead because of the old homes that have been demolished and with lead paint and it's leached into the ground in our area, and a few other things. So as you mentioned earlier, Dr. Brown, gardening is one thing, but making sure that the soil is clean is another, and perhaps raised bed gardenings with clean soil is much better than tilling the ground of a vacant lot you might find somewhere and doing a community garden.
Yeah, and don't forget the sunflowers, because they'll really help you out. I do want to emphasize a few things that Dr. Greger brought up about milk and dairy products. They have done studies also with women and shown there's a link between drinking milk and breast cancer. So, there's also sugar in milk. So we don't think about milk as a sugar source usually, but there's sugar in milk. The other thing is the nut alternatives. I definitely recommend organic because, again, nut trees get sprayed. So if they're not organic, you're going to have an issue with, again, being exposed to pesticides and herbicides. And finally, food-based detoxification is really helpful. So there are foods that actually help you to detoxify naturally. Cilantro, parsley, dandelion greens, garlic, those are things that will help with moving toxins out of your body, as well as, if you drink enough water during the day, that will also help to get toxins moved out of your body. So we keep coming back to food and water and the best quality that you can get. And if you don't think about exercise, it's a good way to detox. So think about what you can do. Walking is great. It's a great form of exercise.
Wonderful. Are there any other questions from those of you who are in the chat? I don't see any more in the chat. Do you, Dr. Edwards? To give folks a chance to enter any additional questions.
I think she has to unmute. Can you?
Oh,
Right.
sorry about that. Did I do something?
Just
There
ask
you
her to unmute.
There you
Yeah.
go.
No, as you said, there was nothing new. I just thank Dr. Brown and Dr. Greger for this interesting talk. I was thinking as she was talking about the dandelion, how my mother used to talk about how they would eat those when I was little, and her sister, that she would be happy. I think there's poke salad. They would love dandelion and poke salad. And I looked at that stuff like, what in the world? They going out in the backyard pulling weeds. And here she's telling me, and here she is telling me that they're healthy. So I guess there was something to what my aunt and my mother knew to do.
I remember
Yes.
I remember the poke salad. Yeah, the poke salad. I never had it, but I remember people picking it in the neighborhood. Is there a question? Are there any oils that are healthy?
Actually, the best oils are the omega-3 oils to cook with. So olive oil, and they did an expose on 60 Minutes a while ago about adulteration of olive oil by the mob in Italy. I mean, I was just like stunned, but apparently the Kirkland brand at Costco, the extra virgin olive oil is good. They've tested it and it's still good. Flaxseed oil is an omega-3 oil that can be used for high heat cooking. So if you really do have to fry something, you know, flaxseed oil is a good one. I steer away from canola oil because it's a highly processed oil, or they call it an industrialized oil. Definitely not vegetable oil. Avocado oil or coconut oil can be good, but you use a lot less. Omega-3 oils will help your brain. It'll help your heart. Some of the other oils may not necessarily be your best friend on that. So I love avocados, but I tend to not cook with the oil because I definitely would use too much. Same with coconut oil. You know, we have all this marketing about coconut oil. People put it in their coffee and put it in, you know, cook with it. And if you look on the back at how much fat is in coconut oil, it's solid on the counter. So things solid on the counter will have eventually a more detrimental effect in your system. And we, you know, do we ever do anything in moderation? Usually not.
Dr. Brown, what about air fryers? I think that's such a new fad right now. What is your thoughts about air fryers?
You know, I've come to love the air fryer because it has taken us away from using oil for every little thing we cook. And definitely away from butter, because butter is dairy and it's solid on the counter. It's the one thing that'll just quickly shoot up your lipid panel. And they'll try to then say you need to take this statin when really you just need to change your diet. So air fryers are great for all kinds of foods. I mean, I use it as a toaster, as a cooker. I mean, you just name it. You can cook a whole chicken in there and it's just amazing. But yes, those are good.
I think there was a question about caffeine and coffee.
Yes. So, you know, coffee is probably the most addictive substance next to sugar in the world. So coffee worldwide, most addictive. In the US, sugar is most addictive. But coffee has some redeeming values. So it can help with focus. It can help people to think better. It can give you more energy. Coffee will last, the caffeine in it, about 5 hours. So the downside of it, besides being addictive and you get a headache if you try to just stop, is that it can cause your blood pressure to go up. So if you have hypertension or have a tendency to have hypertension and you love coffee, I would say take your blood pressure before and after and see if you're one of those people where it will spike your blood pressure. Some people will use coffee when they're highly stressed. And if you feel like you're doing that, you need to address the stress. I mean, there are even herbs that help people kind of buffer stress that are healthier than drinking coffee. You really need to address the situation and the stress. Because if you're drinking five cups of coffee a day or drinking too much, that's going to affect your health, and you'll end up depleting yourself more than helping.
So there was one question before this one. Can you talk about whether it is beneficial to drink alkaline water?
Mhm. You know, that's been an ongoing point of debate in some ways, because our body maintains a very narrow pH. But the marketing with alkaline water is that it's better for you, that it raises your pH, and that if your body's more acidic, then you're more likely to develop cancer. And so there are all these things tied into how we look at alkaline water. So that part is complicated. So let me see if I can unpack it a little bit. It's important to drink water. They did a study with, of course, Caucasian men, showing that if they drank half their body weight in ounces of water, they could decrease their risk of heart disease by 50%. So hydration is important for our hearts to not be stressed. It's also important for detoxification in the body. So if it's alkaline water, great. And for some people, it tastes better. So usually with alkaline water, it's also filtered. So again, we're back to that good quality water. But no matter what you drink, whether it's more acidic water or alkaline water, the body will adjust. Your kidneys will make that adjustment so that your pH maintains in that narrow range. If your body is more acidic and you drink alkaline water, it's very temporary that pH will move a little bit. So really what you want to focus on is quality of the water, sure, but you want to focus on, if your body's a little more acidic, it's probably because you have more added sugars in your body. So eating more vegetables will definitely be a good thing to do, because that will have your body be a little more alkaline, even on that pH range. Alkaline water costs more. So we could drink reverse osmosis or distilled water and still get benefit without it being alkaline. But if alkaline is what gets you to drink good water, then I say go for it.
And then last question, I believe somebody still wants their sugar. They don't believe that they can't have sugar. So they said, can you recommend a particular sugar? They said,
I know.
"I
Yeah,
still
so
want my
that's the
sugar."
thing. Yeah. So this is the place where people start bargaining, and then they start praying. I'm telling you, it's a consistent thing. Like, well, if it's organic, well, if it's honey, well, if it's natural, well, if it's, and honestly, you just have to go for the 30 days. It's not a forever sentence to never have sugar, but if you can get through that 30 days, I mean, squash will be sweet. Cucumbers will be sweet. You know, these things that was like, when did this happen? Did they just get sweet now? No, they've been sweet all along. It's just the sugar blunted the whole effect. When people stop having joint pain, that's an amazing thing when they stop the sugar. But I tell you, what I do is I pray for people who are at this point, because it could, you have a breakdown over the thing. Literally. Like, what am I going to do? If I tell somebody, if you don't stop the sugar, this is likely what will happen for you. So if you don't stop the sugar, you're going to develop diabetes, because that's where your numbers are headed, right? And they say, I just can't. If I said to one of the men, I'm like, if you want to either reverse this issue with your prostate, or you want to prevent prostate cancer, you need to stop eating meat. And what I hear is, I can't. So it just tells me that they're just not ready to take that next step with their health. and that's okay. For sugar, bitter melon, again, it works really well, but you have to do both things at the same time. Taking a bitter melon and eliminating all those added sugars, whatever
And
form they come in.
does that include carbs? Because you talked about bean and rice, but should we also eliminate
No,
carbs or just
Nope.
the sugar?
it's literally the added sugars.
Okay,
It's in
so they
those
can still have carbs.
the zero
Okay.
calorie things. They can have fruit, but it's the added sugars, the processed stuff that's really getting people in trouble.
All right.
I ate out one time at a medical function, and somebody told me that they put sugar in the green beans. I said, "What?" You know, they knew the caterer. Who would? You know, I'm like, I can't wrap my head around it. So then I was like, I can't eat anything because I don't know what's in it.
Well, I was getting close to 7:30. I want to thank you both, Dr. Edwards and Dr. Brown, for this fascinating hour of information. I want to do this again because I know there are more questions, or this probably seeded more questions, or people will think about what was shared in this seminar and we'll have more questions. So I would like to invite you back both. Invite you both back. Maybe I had too much sugar today. Invite you both back for another sequel to this one, and let's see if we can get people on the right track for a better and more prosperous, healthy future. So I thank you again, and on behalf of everybody who joined in on this seminar, I thank you all for joining us. Follow us at Flourishing Communities. .net is our website, our Facebook page, Flourishing Communities. I know there is a Flourishing Communities Inc. out there, but we're not Flourishing Communities Inc. in the Facebook world. We are just Flourishing Communities, and let's take control of our lives. So thank you, doctors.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and everyone have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.